Hello, and welcome to the Graphic Medicine Podcast Monthly Wrap Up. We are your one and only podcast dedicated to discussing comics and how they interact with health, illness, disability, and caregiving. I am your co host, Alex Thomas.
And I am your co-host, MK Serwick. So let's catch up, Alex. What's going on with you these days?
Not much. This week has been a lot of ups and downs. My wallet was stolen out of my clinic office on
Oh
Monday.
no.
I don't think out of my office. I think it fell out of my pocket in the parking lot, but within hours of it happening, I was alerted to fraudulent charges. So that was annoying, but it's fine. It's fine. I got it all figured out. The good stuff that's been going on is that with Booster Shot Media, my partner Gary and I, we are working on the food allergy sequel to Iggy and the Inhalers, and we've been working on this for years now. But this week, we have started doing the voice recording for the animated portion of it. And it's been amazing. So like we're hiring professional voice actors who have amazing skills, and it's just been so fun going through these sessions and hearing like the different takes they can do, and they're just so good at their job. And it's you kind of take for granted when you listen to a cartoon how much skill is put in that. Where we'll have we had one of these voice actors just say like, okay, I'll do three takes, three completely different ways, and you can just pick the one you like and give me notes. And it was just like amazing. And I'd give Gary's much better than me, but I'd give like such boneheaded notes because I was like couldn't articulate what I was trying to communicate well enough, but they got it and it would adjust. And oh, it's been so fun. So I'm really excited. Yeah, Gary actually right now is recording the main character's voices right now, so it's great.
Oh, that is
So
so cool. And this is like a whole nother level too, like to have like voice actors. I mean, I know you guys have done animation things before, but this feels like somehow like a higher production level.
yeah, I mean, so when we did Iggy and the Inhalers, we made we this was now like in 2012 or something like that. It's been many years, but when we first made that, we had a small grant to make these animated videos. But the amount of money that we were given to make that was not the amount that it costs to make an animation. So we really were on a super shoestring budget. All the voice acting that was done the first time around were just from our friends who were actors, who did it completely just for free and for fun and, out of the goodness of their heart. We recorded in my friend's office. He just happened to be like a audio engineer, like on the side, but we used his like corporate office downtown as a recording studio. So this time around, we have, a budget to actually pay professionals properly to do it professionally. And so it's, maybe it's not as, quaint as it was the first time around, but it's still so fun. And I don't want to go too much detail about with the videos themselves, but like there's a lot happening. There's a lot of settings, and the characters are wild, and so it's really fun having all these different cast of characters and how it's going to essentially be like a sequel to this asthma project that we've been working on for 15 years. So really excited. It's one of those things that I'm also like nervous about it coming out, but yeah, we're pushing it along.
Yeah, this is so exciting and so important. And like, yeah, like I'm really excited for you. I can understand. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. I mean, I think with food allergies now, it is really like an important topic, and I think it's good to get this information out while we, with the information that we have before it's replaced by potentially not great information. That's always my concern when
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
vacuum. So, yeah, that's it's been fun. So, how
Yeah.
have you been?
Good. Enjoying the fall. Right now I'm thinking a lot about, well, planning classes for the winter term. I'm going to be teaching a couple of classes. So I've kind of moved from like making my book and making things into this sort of like now in more of a thinking academically. So when I find something exciting, it's like, oh, how can I teach that? But I also really am trying to work on thinking about what keeps my artist inspired. And so I've been doing these like crazy jelly prints. I don't
Yes, I've seen you posting photos of these. Yes,
yeah,
describe them to me.
yeah, so it's this crazy thing that the way I understand the story was invented by a couple of women on Jello, like the top of Jello. They're like, maybe they were printmakers. I don't know. I have this story I've constructed in my head, and half I think is real, but I love this sort of origin story that so they sort of realized that you could use the surface of Jello to like put paint down and then maybe make a mark or something, and then like put paper and you could like pull it, right? So then
Yeah.
obviously Jello itself is not sustainable as a artistic medium, so the pad itself is a mix of mineral oil and polymer, again, as I understand it. So it's this
Yeah.
like super flexy thing that's like almost like the surface of Jello. And then you put acrylic paint, you can use acrylic mark, whatever. You can just do a million different things with it. You can do photo transfers with it. I've been doing obsessed with organic prints. So like
Yeah.
collecting leaves and so you put a layer of paint down and then you put whatever you want down. You can make background prints. You can do all the fascinating stuff. And then you let that layer dry. Then you put like a pull layer. And then you put paper and let it dry. And then it all comes off together. And so it's like printmaking. And
Wow.
everyone is different. They're like mono prints. And I'll send you a few images you can
So,
drop into the
so,
feed.
so you can do a photograph?
You can do photo transfer. So that's more elusive and that's much more challenging. And if anyone's interested, just go on Instagram or YouTube and just look up Jelly, Gelli. It's a trade name, Jelly Print tutorials. And you can watch like 5 minute. And within three, that's the other thing that's so amazing about this is that within 3 seconds of having never done it and watching it, you go, oh, that looks cool. I'm going to try it. And you
That's
probably could do a
amazing.
good job. In fact, I just taught a class at a local art shop. It's I'm obsessed with it because everything's a monoprint, right? Like, so it's
Yeah,
one, everything you do. And they just come out so cool, especially these like leaf prints. And now it's like leaf season, right?
that's amazing.
Yeah. And it's
Wait,
just like, I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed.
when I was an undergrad, we did I took a printmaking course and we did like lithography,
Yeah.
and that tech I mean that technique mystified me because it really was like you could create these images that had like such high degrees of shading, and it could be just on something you drew, and I still don't understand how it worked, but it was
Yeah.
also like incredibly expensive, to get the like the lithography stone and all that
Right.
stuff. So I think that if there's a way that you can kind of do something that's much more DIY, but can
Yeah.
still use like a similar process. That's amazing.
Yeah, and the outcomes are just stunning. Like it's this thing of like I've never been, an artist who could just do something that felt like I don't know how to finish what I'm saying. I think what I'm trying to say is like it makes me feel like, oh, this is what making art that's not comics, but just
Yes.
sort of like more abstract in a way too. And so then
Yeah.
I have to shout out to Beth Tremblay who did Look Again. She really introduced me to this. And the other thing she said that's really fun is you'll never look at garbage the same because everything becomes like, ooh, what kind of pattern would that make on the
Oh,
thing?
that's awesome.
Shipping material and like buy it's just freaking amazing and I'm in love with it. So that's
Wow, that's awesome.
yeah, that's my big inspiration thing. So I'm like between and the other thing is like I live again in an area where I do a lot of nature walks and so my
Yeah.
walks are totally different. Looking at nature, it's like, I did this forest bathing thing, which I don't know if you've ever heard of forest bathing, but it's this like
Mm.
super sort of woo-woo thing where you walk around and like you just sort of really are present to the forest. And one of the prompts this person who led it said was, "What does the forest offer you right now, or what is nature offering you?" And when you start thinking about it, you realize like that's what nature is about. Is just like like offering, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
flower, whatever. And so seasonally too, like I literally have something to do with those offerings, right? So like I grew dahlias this summer and I could use those after they were beautiful, they start to fade, I could do printmaking with these dahlias, right? Like so now there's this
Yeah.
that they last forever. It's really cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna have to look this up
Yeah.
and try it with my kids too. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, it's
And
a
I
great kid thing too. It's a
Yeah,
great
that's what I figure because
yeah.
and I think I like the idea that it's kind of magical as well, where you get this kind of unexpected result from products that don't seem like they would be meant for that.
And
It's kind of awesome.
the other piece that's fascinating is you can pull a print and then it's just this moment of reveal too of like pulling the
Yeah,
print and being like, and sometimes you hate it. You hate it.
yeah,
But then you're like, later, you either could use it for collage, you could later use it as the background for something else, like a photo.
yeah.
Like you never throw any away, even if you hate them, because they end up evolving into something else later when you look at it a
Yeah,
day or two later.
yeah. I mean, I totally get, the draw as well, because I think now, especially with so much of art being made like digitally, on like Procreate or on a tablet, it's like that you just get to undo and keep working on this final product, whereas you don't get these like accidental mistakes that you're
Yes, yes,
stuck with. Because I
yes.
remember as a kid, I used to like my mom, I remember from her office, she had ordered like, I don't know, like thousands of letterhead that all had a typo.
Oh, uh-huh.
And so then like my mom just gave me like reams of white paper that, and this was probably, yeah, we probably should have recycled it immediately, but it was just like unlimited drawing paper for me. And
Yeah.
I just remember like feeling so free to like go to the next page, go to the next page, and just kind of keep trying. Yeah, very wasteful in retrospect, but like at the time, it really was like a great way to kind of just make stuff and not feel, tied to anything. You just keep trying again because you
Yeah,
have
you
like,
just keep going, right? And that's how
yeah,
you learn, right? Like just letting
yeah.
yourself just have complete freedom. So yeah, I've never felt as free as an artist because comics are kind of, I mean, I feel a little goofy in my, but yeah, yeah, exactly.
No, I get it because I think with comics, you kind of by definition or have like some type of purpose or like thesis you're wanting to communicate. And I think with more abstract art, it's like much more open-ended, and you don't have to have a final result in your mind when you start the work and that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
As much as you do with comics, I'd say.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
awesome.
I'm loving it. That's my current obsession.
Cool. All right, why don't we transition to some graphic medicine news? We have a great episode coming up with Shay Mirk. She's a graphic journalist, editor, and teacher, and has an amazing book that we'd like to talk about. But we'll talk about some graphic medicine news first.
Great, great. So I will start with news from the website. So drawing together. So this is a hilarious quick story. Is that the exercises I had planned for the drawing together I did in September, we never got to because the opening warm up exercise was, where did you find yourself in comics as a kid? And the sharing was so amazing. I just at some point decided, no, we're going to share because like all the hands were raised and people were talking about comics they loved. And I was just like, I'm not stopping this. So the entire session was the warm up exercise. So the next one in November is going to be the exercises I actually had planned. And I'm super excited about it. In the interim, in October, Abru Ustendag hosted with this incredible session called Acoustic Geographies. And the video for that will be posted ASAP, hopefully by the time you're listening to this. On the awards front, we are working diligently behind the scenes, getting ready to put all the pieces in place to announce the 2026 awards. So that's exciting. So watch the site for details. But very excited about who we've got on board for shortlisting and for our judges, and that's all very exciting. Um, the reviews are like kicking it. Like Kevin has so many reviews. Like last week, the newsletter was, I think there were like 6 new reviews on the site. So
Amazing.
and we actually have reviews for a book that hasn't even released yet currently this week. So it's just amazing. Kevin Wolf is just doing such a great job. And the reviewers. I mean, it all goes to the reviewers.
Yeah.
And then the last thing was events. Nonfiction Comics Fest will be in Burlington, Vermont on the 15th. So I was planning to be there, and I am currently up in the air because I don't know that I'll be able to get a flight there with flight cancellation.
Oh,
So
right.
I am kind
Yeah.
of heartbroken that I might have to cancel, but hopefully by the time you listen to this, you'll know whether I went or not. But I don't know yet.
Yeah, it's my son's birthday this weekend, and we initially were thinking about going to like, Disney World or something like that. Thank goodness we didn't this weekend. That would have been horrible. Oh my gosh.
Mm.
Um, okay, so from the GMIC board, the big news is that the call for submissions for our 2026 conference is live. So if you head to our website, which I'm going to cut to right now, um, we have the full call for proposals and submissions there. So once again, the Graphic Medicine Conference is going to be at Baltimore at Johns Hopkins University, July 23rd to 25th in 2026. And the theme I'm really excited about this year, it's drawing perspectives, health graphic narratives under pressure. And so, as all of us, I'm sure are feeling is that healthcare in various ways is under new forms of pressure that have not been maybe as present they were in previous years. And so the conference is trying to address that kind of concern and that climate that we're living in. So we're going to be exploring this theme broadly to include the ways that our community leverages the medium of comics to propose diverse perspectives on healthcare, illness, disability, social medicine, often working under these various pressures. So, whether it's living with chronic illness, the shifting institutional conditions for health and medical research and healthcare practices, or other constraints such as time, healthcare disparities, ableism, and other various forms of marginalizations and prejudice, that's kind of the topic we are wanting to address this year. And I think it's going to produce a lot of great discussions and important work. So I'm excited. Similar to previous years, we're going to have different types of presentations that will be welcoming. So lightning talks, those 5-minute presentations to provide an engaging, concentrated synopsis of ongoing work or something that's recently been completed. The 15-minute oral presentations, which are more of these larger collaborative interdisciplinary works. And then we also have the panel discussions, those 90-minute discussions with a panel of speakers. And then once again, the things we love also are the workshops, and those are those 90-minute hands-on activities. So if you have thoughts of submitting any of those, please head to the website and take a look. We are looking at them now, so it's great.
Great, great. I have a lot of exciting ideas. I'm really excited about the conference. It's really, really terrific. Yeah. Cool. Cool, cool.
Awesome.
All right, so I'm going to segue introducing our guest. So I'm like crazy excited because yeah, for a lot of reasons. So Shay Mirk is the author of Guantanamo Voices, editor of Be Gay, Do Comics, and writer of the Invulnerable series of comics, if you remember those from during COVID and beyond. Most recently, Shay's the co-author with Ellery Harris of the amazing comics Bible we have needed forever, Making Nonfiction Comics, which actually releases November 11th. Also, Shay's an editor at Crucial Comics and kind of arising from work at the Nib, and we'll talk about that in the interview. We have a lot to discuss. So I'm really excited to welcome Shay Mirk to the Graphic Medicine Podcast.
I'm super happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great, great, great. Well, first of all, I want to say congratulations on the book. It is absolutely fantastic. I think when I was talking about it a minute ago, I said something about it's like the Bible that we have needed forever. It's really exciting. Um, and
Yeah.
and your many years of experience doing this work are so apparent in the book. I feel like it's just going to be such a useful textbook and guide. But before we dive into that, we love to start with this question that I'm sort of obsessed with. What is your cartoonist or comics, you choose the path, origin story?
Yeah, I love this question. I've been making comics my whole life. I love the artist Linda Berry who talks about how kids grow up with this natural, spontaneous language of combining words and pictures. And then at some point, a lot of people lose that. They're told that they're doing it wrong. They're told that they're selfish for drawing. They're told that there's a right way to do it and they're doing it wrong. And I feel so grateful that in my life, I never lost that language. I never had that experience of somebody in my family telling me it was a waste of time. So I grew up reading and drawing comics with my older brother mostly. So I have a lot of memories of us just sitting around the dining table, drawing like new versions of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Imagining what if they were different animals? What if it was Teenage Mutant Ninja Dolphins? We're gonna draw that story. And then from there, making up our own characters. I drew a whole comic series as a kid about my dogs. Um, what are they up to in the day when we're gone? Obviously, they're supervillains trying to take over the world. Um, and yeah, I just love to draw as like an expression of my creativity and thoughts and excitement as a kid. And I read a lot of Mad Magazine and Gru by Sergio Aragonés and Tintin. So it was kind of my basis growing up. And then, in high school, I started doing like diary comics, memoir comics. I'm from a really small town, so I didn't have any kind of community around it. Um, yeah, and so I basically thought that I invented the medium of zines as a teenager. It's like I was like, I'm gonna write these little comics and then I'm gonna photocopy them and distribute them to my friends. Like, this is brilliant. And then I finally went to a comics convention when I was in high school and saw that there was tables and tables of people making stuff like I was making. And it blew my mind to realize that I was part of a whole community, that I was part of a world of people making comics and zines. And I immediately was like, this is where I want to be. I want to be behind the table selling my work. I want to know all of these people. This was a convention. There was probably only like maybe 50 tables there. And my friend and I went for 2 solid days. We met every single artist. I showed everyone my sketchbook. I gave everyone little zines that I'd made. I was just like hungry and in it.
Yeah.
So that's where I started. And then in college, a friend and I ran a student comics publication called The Sequence. So we started immediately like using school funds to publish our work and along the way publish other people's work too. And it's always gone hand in hand like that for me.
That's amazing. Yeah, I resonate a lot with your childhood experiences. My brother and I did a lot of that. So shout out to Slugman, Danny, if you're listening. Uh,
Wow,
so,
Slugman. That
oh
sounds like
man,
maybe a Foxtrot reference. Maybe you guys were riffing on Foxtrot.
it was kind of that. We did variations of that Foxtrot character. That's what it was.
Yeah, and I think now, there's so many more access points for kids and teens to get into comics.
Yeah,
When I was growing up, we would drive half an hour to the Borders, and at Borders there was one shelf of comics, and it was like, this is it. And I read every single book on that shelf. And now
yeah.
it's so cool to think about if people are into comics, there's a huge world for them to access. There's a lot more than one bookshelf. There's
Yeah, I mean,
infinite
with
number of comics on Webtoon, so it's cool to think about the whole world just expanding.
absolutely, and just with with my kids when they like are wanting to order books from like Scholastic, it's like there's so many comics there where that's amazing. It's crazy. I mean, they honestly they take it for granted, but it's it's
You're like,
fantastic.
back in my day,
I know. I
we
was like,
had
do
to
you
walk a
understand?
mile for one comic.
Yeah, I was like, do you know how cool it is that you can just buy a comic from your school? Yeah. Anyway, that's amazing. So I mean, it's great that it sounds like, that you kind of organically, fell into the community. And I feel like that's very similar, like in this kind of, umbrella world of graphic medicine. There's a lot of similar feelings where people are making kind of graphic medicine work. And then they come to like one of our conferences and are like, oh, other people do this? This is amazing. And then suddenly everyone's very passionately, into the community. And it's a great thing because I think it's like yeah, nature finds a way. It's like when you're working in isolation, you just will kind of organically invent zines. And I think it's just that it's a natural way to, want to communicate ideas. And I think that there's a reason why zines are so kind of meaningful and impactful because it's like a DIY thing that people can really resonate with very easily. So that's really cool. Um, and I guess kind of, along the same lines, I feel like this book is almost like an extension or a progression of that. So how did you decide to kind of create this, as MK calls it, a Bible for creating comics, nonfiction comics?
Yeah, well, this book actually started as a zine. Back in 2020, I was working for the Nib, as a comics publication where I published political comics and nonfiction comics, and we ran for about 10 years. And because of my work there, people would email me all the time asking for advice and help on their own projects. Whether like it's a lot of researchers, like academics, who are saying, "Hey, I'm doing this research and I want to get it out to the world. Um, I would love to publish it as a comic. How do I do that?" Or people are making memoir comics, and just looking for advice on how to make memoir comics. So I started teaching comics classes. First in person and then online. And every class I taught just sold out and like filled up. People were like hungry for this information and hungry for some kind of structure to help them get started on making their comics. And so I was like, I should make a zine about how to make nonfiction comics, so that I can send it to all the people who ask me for advice, rather than having to do a phone call with each person. What if I just sent them a zine? And so I started mapping out a zine about it. And I love making zines. I've made thousands of zines over the course of my life. I'm kind of prolific zine maker. And this one I got started on, and there was immediately too much information. I was like, I kind of mapped it out, and I was like, "Ooh, the zine is going to be like 100 pages. That's that's a little too long
Maybe
for a
not a zine
zine."
anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a zine
I was
anymore.
like, maybe that's a book. Yeah. And so I started thinking about like, oh, I should pitch a book about this. And when I thought about putting together a book proposal, it seemed really wrong to do it without my friend Larry Harris, who's my co-author on the book, because she worked with me at the Nib, and she's the one who really taught me how to edit nonfiction comics.
Mm.
Um, so, I come from a background in journalism as like a writer and podcast host and drawing all the time on the side. And then when I joined the Nib, Larry was the one who really taught me how to edit nonfiction comics, like to do the kind of visual thinking that's necessary to really think about the flow of your eye across the page and to really notice the visual dynamics of each panel that need to be edited. And so just felt wrong to do it without her. So I asked if she wanted to collaborate and make this book together. And she said yes. So we put together that proposal in 2020 and pitched it in 2021. So we've been working on it since then.
That's fantastic. And that's a great segue to the question I had in mind next, which was, as someone who's done oral history, I just really love the inclusion of the interviews. It speaks to like this is about a community, and so it brings in a lot of people, but also like I felt like it's you go to comics conferences and they have these panels, and you're like, this whole panel needs to be documented, and so it's great that they're online sometimes, but like I feel like in some way the book documents like the best of these amazing pieces of wisdom from people who do this, right? These panels that where you can find it all in one book, and that's just another thing I love about the book. So, did your history in journalism kind of really inspire you in terms of including these interviews? Because so much of journalism is about doing interviews.
Yeah, I love that you feel that way about the book. Thanks for saying that. Because I just naturally feel like my approach to comics is always collaborative. Even if it's a comic that I'm making on my own, writing, drawing, publishing it entirely by myself, I'm still really influenced by by other artists. I'm often just like sort of drawing on experiences and influences from other artists. So I think of all comics as collaborative. And so when we started putting together this book, I was like, this has to be a collaboration. It wouldn't feel right to have it just be me and a Larry saying, this is how you make comics. Because I mean, we're pretty good at it, but we're not like the voice of authority or experts. Everyone who makes comics has kind of made their own way to it and has created their own methods for approaching it and has their own sort of thoughts and reflections on how they approach making comics, especially nonfiction work, what people think is okay to include or leave out, the choices people make about how to depict reality in a comic, which is inherently representational. So, how do you turn reality into a two-dimensional drawing? Everyone has sort of come up with different approaches to that, and their own personal values and ethics influence that. And so that's something I really wanted to capture in the book is, okay, between, let's say, 40 artists, what are the patterns that line up between how people are approaching this work? What ways have people invented on their own
Yeah.
to approach making comics? And can we share that knowledge to help guide people on their way into making them? So doing it collaboratively just felt inherently right. And yeah, I immediately saw it as we could interview a bunch of people about their work and then include panels from their work in the book. That felt really important to me because in the book we're showing our drawing style. So Larry and I thumbnailed this book together. So we swapped off chapters, each thumbnailing one chapter, and then Larry did the final line work in colors. So the art really like is her style, but it's got some of my visual voice in there and the layouts. But that's only one style. There's every artist has a different style and a different approach. And so it felt really important to me to be like, oh, I want to show like 50 different styles if we can and see and give readers that option of like, ooh, I could draw comics this way. I could draw comics that way. And to see what resonates with readers visually. And so it's not just one style represented, but 40 different styles. That felt really important to me. And then just like I was thinking about the books that have been made about comics, the most famous book about making comics is by Scott McCloud. If people have read one book, it's probably Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. And that book has a lot that's really solid and really interesting about it, and it really helped like give us a lot of the language for understanding comics. But it's very from his perspective. It's like, here's what I'm thinking, here's the ideas I've come up with. And I felt like what we could add to that was a book that felt like a collaborative chorus of voices,
Yeah.
to feel like, okay, we have a different approach to making comics. Our approach is very collaborative. Even in the process of making the book, we're collaborating across borders from Australia to the United States. And everything about this book is collaborative. And that's kind of a different approach to making comics. And so it felt like, okay, here's what we can add to the what's already on the bookshelf. And that's a process that's really rooted in like transnational collaboration.
Yeah, so that's a perfect segue, which is what I wanted to talk about, which was how you guys made this book. Because I think you have this page. I think it's on yeah, 256, where you go through exactly how you and Larry collaborated. And I'm stunned at how you were able to be so collaborative when you were, working, yeah, transnationally, and that you had kind of limited times where you were together and then apart again. And yeah, just talk us through the process of creating something that collaborative when you guys were not physically in the same location.
Yeah, I love that this book works. I had like it's I feel like every book is kind of just like a wild scheme where you're like, maybe this is gonna work. Let's give it a shot. And then it really came together. So this is just kind of a fun idea I had, which is I love doing jam comics. So jam comics, it's like a game you can play where one person draws one panel and then you pass the page around and the next person draws the next panel, and then the next person draws the next panel. So it's something I play at comics conventions. If I'm tabling, I draw one panel and I hand it to the person next to me and they add to it. It's something I do at parties. Anytime I get a group of people around, I'm like, let's make a jam comic. And I really wanted this book to feel kind of like the approach to making it to like embody that playfulness of a jam comic. And so, yeah, how we did it is Larry and I like each wrote one chapter. So Larry wrote the first chapter, I wrote the second chapter, Larry wrote the third chapter, back and forth, back and forth. And then we swapped and edited each other's. So I edited the second chapter, Larry edited the third chapter, back and forth. And then when we thumbnailed it, same thing. We swapped off chapters. So I thumbnailed the first chapter, Larry thumbnailed the second chapter, I thumbnailed the third chapter, swapped back and forth. Um, and that really felt like, oh, we both get our voice in this book. We both are really bringing our own perspectives to it. But then we had a Larry do the final line work and colors so that it has a visual consistency. We did play around with in our like proposal for the book. We both did like the final line art um, on that. So it was like we swapped off one panel. Like I drew the final line art for a panel, and then Larry did the next one, and it just didn't look great. It looked a little clunky, having our art combined like that. But it worked pretty well, I think, to have me thumbnail half of it and then Larry do all the final art. And while Larry was drawing and was inking and coloring that, which I should say she's Australian American and she got a grant from the Australian government to support that work. So she was able to take a year to work on that. And it took her, as she documented in the book, 795 hours to ink and color this book. So it's really, really helpful to have that kind of like government support for the arts that allowed her to do it. And while she was working on that, I worked on editing down the interviews and getting all the licenses for all the panels in the book, and laying and doing some layout work and other logistical stuff. I'm the person harassing artists over email to be like, "Can you sign your contract, please?" Um, so I sort of had like the business end of the work to do, and Larry was just inking madly. And so I hope it feels like fun and playful as you're reading it, and really feels like it's a collaboration bottom to top.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And and another thing I love about the book is that you talk about a couple of topics that are frequently overlooked in discussions, but come up a lot in graphic medicine, which is trauma-informed comic making, trauma-informed reporting, and then the ethics of this work. And obviously, like, especially as healthcare providers who create comics, like if, myself, I wanted to do a book about a unit I worked on as a nurse, right? I went to grad school to help me figure out how do I deal with that? Like, how do I think about that? And it's almost interesting. It's like how you talk about how comic artists kind of do self-education, is that everybody kind of, I've noticed when we talk about this, everybody kind of develops their own ethic of how they're going to represent just other people in their life when you do nonfiction, right? Especially if you're telling difficult family stories or if you're telling patient illness, whatever. All of it becomes really complex ethically. But also it is, um, I'm going on here, but early on, Ian Williams wrote this article about this myth that doing work about difficult experiences in life is cathartic. And the point of the article was like, no, it's actually sort of re-traumatizing, right? You're revisiting, visually representing, you're going through the emotions as you create it, of that difficult time in your life. And so there is sort of a trauma-informed care that is necessary for the person making the work about themselves, but then also if you're asking other people to talk about those things, right? So I'm going on, but can you speak about how those things really kind of came to the fore in the making this book? And I'm thrilled that they're there.
Yeah, that's so nice to hear. Thanks for shouting that out. That's definitely informed by our histories as journalists. So I worked in journalism before getting into making comics professionally for about 10 years as a reporter and editor. And I had zero training in trauma-informed reporting. I had zero training in taking care of myself and my mental health. And I feel like when I was working, it was very much an era of just like write as much as you can. We need to publish a bunch on our blog.
Mm,
So I was, writing in the early 2000, in like 2008, 2016, like, at least one article a day, about, 5 to 10 articles every week. It was wild
mm,
and working probably 70 hours a week
mm,
all like for the cause, because I felt like it was really important stories to tell and really important work to be doing. And people were trusting me to talk to me about their stories. So I just felt like I just have to work, 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 work. And that's not very healthy. Yeah, when I took a step back from that, I realized like how much stress was in my body and how like I didn't know how to live without just working all the time.
mm,
And from that point on, I really started thinking about how can I approach making journalistic work in a way that is like sustainable for me. And also this is work that never ends. Like truly, like there's always more political work to do. There's always more interesting stories to tell. There's always something that's being overlooked. It's never ending, and so you can work, work, work. And so in writing this book, I really wanted to kind of give people the self-care and tools that I did not have
mm,
when I started working in journalism. These days, I teach a lot of comics classes, um, and so I teach memoir comics, and people show up to my class with such big and heavy stories to tell.
mm,
People really want to dive in and make comics to process some of the most traumatic things in their lives. A lot of people in my classes make comics about grief, about death, about their own bodies, and it brings up a lot. On the last day of the class, when we share our comics, literally everyone cries. It's a lot of crying. And that's beautiful. It's really beautiful that people are up for being vulnerable like that. It's beautiful that people want to make work about that. And at the same time, I'm like, how can like if you're diving into this really deep, difficult stuff with like no support structure,
mhm,
like you're in danger. And that comes from my own experience too, where the most recent book that I wrote before this was about Guantanamo Bay Prison
yeah.
and it's called Guantanamo Voices. And it's a series. I just interviewed 10 different people about their experiences at the prison, and then a different artist illustrates each story. So it's an anthology of 10 different stories from Guantanamo Bay Prison. And I had about a year to write that book, and that year I was just very isolated. I read every book about Guantanamo. I did these interviews, and my whole world for that year was like torture and US imperialism and people's story, how to translate those stories into comics. And I would say I did not have a good support structure at all.
Mm,
I was just in a mindset of like, I just gotta hunker down and get this done. Um, and I did not have a therapist, and I did not have any like friend or collaborator who was like in it with me. Um, the artists who worked on the book were great, but they came in later after I'd already finished writing the scripts. So it was just kind of like me winging it for about a year. And that was really tough. That's when I really got into making zines because I realized, oh, I need something to do every day just to like express myself and be imperfect. So I would set a timer for an hour each day and make a zine about whatever I wanted to. And that was my outlet for that year that I was working on the book. And so I think in this book, I really want to encourage and empower people to create comics about the most difficult things in the world, about the stuff that we're actually experiencing, political violence, um, family trauma, like body issues, that stuff is really important to make comics about. But like to do it with a support network, whether that's friends or collaborators, or just all the resources that you have available. It's not work to make if you're just going it alone. If you just wing it like me, you're gonna have a mental breakdown and eventually sooner or later. And so yeah, that's really what I want people to take from this is that comics are a really, really powerful medium, and you can talk about some of the most difficult topics in the world in a really emotionally resonant way. But to take stock of what resources you have around you to support you doing that work, and that every story feels too big to tell. So, what's the story that you have the resources to work on right now, and what's something you can like save for the future, you know?
And how you
Yeah, I mean,
take care of yourself along the way. Yeah.
I think I think it's a common trope that like cartoonists work in isolation and kind of are just creating these comics without by themselves. And this is such a great example of both the creation of comics, but also the sharing of it needs to be collaborative so that it's not overwhelming for the artist. And I think that, as you said, like Scott McCloud's, work helped define terms, but this is almost like using, decades since then of experience to kind of
Yes.
fill the space with kind of, real time life experiences of making comics and making nonfiction comics and the lessons learned and how they can be taught. It's amazing, and I love the format of just being able to share different perspectives of these different topics. And I think yeah, I just love the various chapters that are covered. Of course, for our podcast, we're very excited about chapter 7, where you talk about data science and graphic medicine. And so for me, I guess the question was, it's such a broad, complex topic. How did you go about kind of deciding how to cover data, representation science, and then specifically graphic medicine?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I get so annoyed by that myth of an artist as a singular genius working alone. It's just so not true. Even if somebody is really solitary in their work and working away alone at their desk all by themselves, they absolutely have other people supporting them in that work. They have an editor, they have a publisher, they probably have somebody who's like making them food all the time. And so I just think it's a really important message to be like, oh, we're stronger through collaboration, and that like nobody is working entirely alone. We all have people behind the scenes who are boosting us up and supporting us. It's so funny when a book is published, I feel like it's just the author's name on the cover, but I think it should be the editor's names on there. I
Yeah,
think the book designer's name should be on there. I think every book should be published like a scientific article, where you have 10 names at the end. And so
that's a
it's just
great
the
idea,
author being
actually.
like,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
yeah. So it's just the author being like, I made this. It's me,
Yeah,
the genius. And then the editor's names are in like tiny, tiny text on the inside page. So yeah, like this book, there's our editors were Charlotte Greenbaum and Lydia Nguyen at Abrams Comic Arts, and I just feel like they should get top billing too. So yeah, just to talk about that, and then for the section on data science, yeah, this felt really important because a lot of the work that people are interested in doing these days is translating academic research into comics, um, or translating scientific research of some kind into comics. And I think it's such an important and really growing medium for comics that's been mostly like unexplored, especially in sort of guides. And one group that I work with, I help run this a comics press called Crucial Comics. We publish narrative nonfiction comics, and my collaborator on it, Audra McNamee, helps run a science comics initiative from University of Oregon. And with that initiative, they pair up researchers with artists and have the artists, like the student artists, make comics about the academics' work. And I just think this is going to blow up. I'm like, every university in the country needs some comics artists, students to be translating scientific work because it's so infuriating to me that researchers can spend years and years and years working on a topic, publish a paper that 10 people read. I think
You.
every PhD dissertation should also have a comics version that people will actually read. And so I see that as a really growing field. So it's something we really wanted to address in the book. I think honestly, the framing for this chapter was mostly motivated by what Ilaria and I are really annoyed by, like what's really frustrating. So, so pet peeves, I think is a big motivator. So
I
especially when
love
you're
it.
looking at charts and data, um, how people represent that often is really misleading, um, intentionally or unintentionally. Um, and or when people are writing comics about scientific topics, they can often be really visually boring. So both of those twin problems. One is that if you're including charts and numbers and facts and stuff, if you turn it into a comic, just sort of being like blah, blah, this is what it looks like, versus trying to maintain the sort of scientific integrity of the charts is important. And then the second problem that we often run into is when somebody's writing a comic about a scientific topic, they don't know what images to include or how to make it a visual story. So it winds up just feeling like an illustrated Wikipedia entry. It's like, here's a bunch of facts, and here's maybe the scientist saying them. There's like one person talking, and they're just sharing facts. That's it. That's the comic.
Yeah,
So that's not very visually interesting. It's not using the power of comics to tell a visual story. And so that's what we're trying to encourage people to do with this chapter is really think about how can you make a story that's about, how can you make data into a story? How can you make your research into a visual story?
yeah,
And that with nonfiction comics, you don't have to be literal. A lot of the power of comics is being able to be abstract, is being able to use visual metaphor, is being able to evoke sort of an emotional reality through use of color, or the things that you're drawing. So, if you are like talking about the future of the climate crisis, you can draw what the world might look like in 100 years. You can draw what the world looked like 500 years ago. You can travel through space and time in comics, and you don't have to stick to like, here's exactly the images that we saw today. Not every panel needs to be based on a photo reference. You can use your creative imagination and be like, okay, here's what this is going to feel like in 100 years. And we can try and capture that. So those are the big
that's great.
messages we try to get across.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
and go ahead.
I'm just gonna. I have one question that this fits with this really well, which is, I was looking at the your submission page for Crucial Comics, and specifically in one section, you say that you're not looking for infographics or comics, educational comics without a narrative, and I feel like that's kind of what we're talking about. So, how would you how do you see like narrative as important for this type of like health communication or educational messaging?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Maybe I haven't articulated this before, because it just feels inherently important to me, which is like, what's the difference between an infographic and a comic?
Hmm.
And an infographic, I think, is just the data. It's just the information, maybe displayed in a pretty way. You did some great graphic design, you like chose some good colors, but it's not a story, it's not a narrative. And I really see comics as being a medium for storytelling. So every piece of data has a story.
Right.
What's the story behind it? Whether you're going to tell the story of the researcher working on it, or the story of who the data is representing, or the story of who's impacted by this, like what's the story behind that data? And that's way more compelling than just the number itself out drifting in space without context. I think as humans, we're hardwired to understand the world through story. And that was something that I really learned as a journalist is I feel like when I started off as a journalist, I was very optimistic, thinking if we just give people the data, we'll change the world. People just don't know what the numbers are here. And if we share
Yeah.
the information,
Right.
then obviously people will support universal health care, And it took me kind of a long time to realize, like, like people understand story. They connect with story. They remember story. And so if you want to make work that is emotionally resonant with people, that like people emotionally connect with, that they remember, that impacts them, that changes the way that they see the world, that helps them understand a new perspective, you got to tell it as a story. And that story can have a lot of data in it, but what's the emotional heart of the story that you're telling? That's what people are going to remember, and that's what's going to impact them.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the idea of having artists collaborate with like scientists or data, scientists is great. A lot of the work I do is collaborating with universities and people, researchers, and a lot of it has to do with educating them about the potential of comics because I think that left to their own devices, they also just want to make infographics and photorealistic images that will illustrate their articles or things like that. And I totally agree that a lot of it has to do with finding metaphors or abstraction that actually get closer to the truth than the specific details do. I know there's one project that we're working on where the goal of the project was for this university research program to help explain the kind of ambiguous data about like whole genome sequencing for kids with severe developmental delays, basically. And they had a hard time communicating with the families who participated in the study about like how this is not a clear cut like positive or negative result of the study, and there's a lot of ambiguity to it. And the best way in the end we came up with communicating that was to literally just make a story of someone reviewing those results and all the implications it has with them. And that was like way better than like going into the weeds of like all the details of the numbers and this and that. And I think it was really eye-opening for myself, but also for the researchers that yeah, narrative was like key to just kind of get to that the heart of the data like you're talking about.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and so you kind of gestured to the fact that you think this is going to be on the rise, and I agree with that 1,000%. I do a lot of consulting work with science communication programs at universities that are looking to integrate this aspect. And I'm teaching a course, a couple of courses in that coming up. And one of them I've actually taught before, and it was with biomedical visualization students, what we used to call medical illustrators. And they get taught narrative really well in the program that I teach in, but comics are like a whole nother level of like what I talk about with them as a tool in their toolbox. And that's not comics are not necessarily something that they have the skill to. So it's really exciting to have this guide to use. And I'm going to have the students buy this book. I was telling Alex, I never have my students buy books. Like we read a lot of excerpts and all that, or online comics. We use the nib a ton in my classes. So I'm so grateful that all that stuff is still available. But I'm really excited to have them buy this book and really, just learn from it. One of the things we did last year, just kind of to your point, was that, and I don't know if you've ever been to any of these poster sessions, like medical conferences, health science conferences, these poster sessions. And all these posters are giant versions of academic articles in solid text. It's
Uh-huh.
insane. And
That's
these
exactly what
poster
you're talking about.
sessions, it's so bizarre. And the poster sessions are such that there's the researcher standing there next to the giant poster of a billion words on on a poster. And you're supposed to just walk through the session. And so you're supposed to walk up to this wall of text, tiny text, look at the person, look at the work, and then discuss it in any meaningful way. And it's insane. So one of the things we did was we actually each got to choose an academic article from a group of them, and they had to make them posters, right? And it was so exciting to see the potential of like, I want every, kind of like you were saying, I want all these incredible academic articles that people should read to have a life in the world through comics. I think it's the same thing for these poster sessions, like using a narrative, using engaging visuals, not just infographics, like would make those sessions really exciting and God forbid fun. So anyway, so that's my little soapbox I'm getting
I mean,
off
so
of.
I will say like one problem also with academic journals is that they have this antiquated view of images. So, for example, like if we create like a comic for a study and they want to just show a page of the comic, the journal will say, "Oh, that means we own the comic now." Like it's like they have this like really
Oh,
backwards way of
wow.
like understanding. So there was a couple times where we like couldn't print, a comic we made for a study because the journal then has some like copyright claim because it's been printed in their journal. It's crazy, and it was something was like they need to like think of this different than a graph or something. But yeah, it's just it takes more people doing it, I think, to help change
Right.
that.
Right. And
Yeah,
also they will, I'm sorry, that they will print a whole study about a comic, will discuss it in depth, And yeah, the comic's not there. And that's for that reason. And so now one thing that was like when we started out, kind of the journals are hungry for this, like because they want online clicks and they want visual interaction. And so it's a process of negotiating, right? So when the Annals of Internal Medicine started running comics, Michael Green and I had to have a conversation of them. Like, it's a whole different realm. You have to understand that, like, and so we negotiated it, and they've got, over 100 comics on the site now because we said, we found a middle ground where, as long as the artist, when they reprint it in their graphic novel or their whatever, they say this piece originally appeared and that's it. And so anyway, there's workarounds for that. And so I hope, like, to your point, that these journals start thinking about, you can get a lot more bang for your article if you include these amazing visuals. Just be flexible in how you approach it and not this predatory model of it's ours now.
Yeah, that's wild. I didn't know that about like journals and copyright. I haven't heard that before. But yeah, I think, when I was working as a journalist writing articles, I just felt like I was shouting into the void. I spend a long time writing an article about something really important and publish it, and then a few people would read it, but it just like didn't have the impact that I wanted it to. And I really just felt like I was banging my head against a wall. And then on the side, I was making comics. At that time, I was making comics about Oregon history. Like, I did a whole series of comics about little known and marginalized stories from Oregon's history. And people loved those comics and they read them. And I was but why aren't you reading my big important
Right,
articles?
right, right,
So,
right.
so it really taught me that like people will read a comic on a wide variety of topics that they probably wouldn't read a big dense history book about. And
Absolutely.
so comics can really be a way to bring people in and to draw them in. And I'm a big believer in like I personally love big dense history books. So you can still have the heavy version, but a comic is a really great way to like grab people's attention, to bring them in, and to communicate information. Just because, our brains can hold a lot of information if they're told in a way that makes sense to us, and just sort of shouting data at people doesn't work very well. But if
Right.
you frame it in with a visual thing that you can understand, it hits that visual part of our brain. If you frame it as a story, it hits that storytelling part of our brain. And
Okay.
so just comics can be a really great way to help people understand the information that you're desperately trying to share. Yeah.
Yeah. And we see that a lot in graphic medicine. I mean, I talk a lot about like consent forms nobody reads. There are pilot projects trying to do those in comic form, so they actually will engage, or like the prescription information or discharge information from the hospital. Like nobody reads all that
I
text.
love that. Yeah.
Right. And so there
Cool
are pilot
idea.
projects in each of those areas to kind of look at how could comics help that. And then especially like what you're saying, like I see that so much with my medical students. So they're so overwhelmed. And I remember there was a copy of Cancer Vixen, and one student said, you mentioned this thing, and I want to go into oncology. I would have never read a person's like own story in text, but I sat down and I read that entire book, and now I have a whole different
Mm.
perspective of the lived experience of illness, which is so important to teach to future doctors and nurses and healthcare providers, right? But enough of my soapbox. I want to cut back to Crucial Comics because I don't want to, and this is probably I'll wrap up this section with this question about Crucial Comics. So, and you come from the nib and you talk even in making nonfiction comics about the nib being so amazing and so important, and we certainly feel that way in the graphic medicine community, but yet not sustainable as a site. How do you plan on keeping Crucial Comics sustained? Because you're doing so many wonderful things there. There's the disability group, that's a community, all the comics you publish, and there's so much. What is your thought about keeping that sustainable for you as the editors and owners of the site?
That's such a compassionate question. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. So Crucial, my friend and collaborator Audra McNamee and I started it last year. Basically, I wanted to have a place to publish nonfiction comics that also supported the creation of nonfiction comics. So again, I was motivated a lot by spite and frustration of being like, there's so many cool artists, including myself, who are just publishing their work on Instagram.
Mhm.
And when we publish work on Instagram, who does that make money for?
Yeah,
Billionaires.
yeah,
Don't like it. And when you publish on Instagram, you're subject to the whims of Instagram's algorithm, including censorship and not knowing, where is this going to be archived in the future when the algorithm changes. So I was like, we got to have a place that we control that in some way that publishing helps support the creation of more art versus just supporting billionaires. It just seems like it should exist, right? And then at the same time, I'm teaching these classes online about making comics, and every class is full, and I literally can't teach enough classes. Like people are hungry for this information, and I was kind of really burning myself out by trying to. There was one year where I taught 8 classes, just like one session back to back to back, because I kept feeling bad that people wanted to get in the classes and they couldn't. And I was like, okay, I'll just add another class. And then at the end of the year, I was like, what did I do to myself? Why did I teach this class 8 times in a row? And so I was like, okay, so we have a lot of people that want to take classes. And we have a lot of people that want to publish work, and we have artists who always need money. Can we like combine these things together to create um, like a publishing platform where we teach classes and then the classes fund the comics? And so it's a crucial is a teaching press, which means we don't really make money by publishing books. You know, most publishing places, they publish a product like a book, and then they make money from selling the book, and then that funds future publications. I've have found working in independent media that relying on selling a print product is a really dangerous game because the costs of print can go up and down. You know, during like 2020, the cost of paper doubled, you know, and that really ate into the nib's profit. Suddenly, yeah, when the cost of paper doubles and you can't double the cost of your magazine. And then if the book doesn't sell well, you're out of money. You know, I used to work at the feminist magazine Bitch, which published a print magazine, and it would be a big problem if an issue didn't sell well, because suddenly we'd be thousands of dollars in the hole, and any reserves we had were just gone. And so I was like, I don't think that selling a product, so like selling a print product, is a very good way to make money. Instead, we run online classes and artists teach the classes. And then any money we make from the classes can go back into publishing comics. So we pay the teachers 75% of the income from the class and then keep the other 25% to publish comics. And so the amount of money we have to publish comics does vary. It depends on how many people sign up for the class and what rate they pay, because all the classes are sliding scale and they're really affordable. But so some months we don't have a lot of money to publish comics and we only publish like one or two. Some months we have enough money to publish 4 original comics. And that feels really good. So it feels like we've been doing it for a year now. And in our first year of publishing, we published about 65 comics, and we were able to pay teachers about $16,000. And at the same time, you know, we also publish a book called Cartoons for Palestine, and we're able to donate about $3,000 to Palestinian medical aid. So it really feels like the scheme is working,
Nice.
um, going really well, but we keep it small. So it's not like an expansive place. We're really trying to be like, okay, we're not spending more money than we have.
Yeah.
And so that means having to say no to a lot of really cool comics and cool ideas that are just like, how much is that going to cost? This year, we just started a Patreon, which is great. So we now have a really small Patreon that brings in money each month. And our goal for the end of the year is to be paying both me and Audra, my collaborator, about $400 a month to do our editorial tasks. Um,
Good.
that's not a lot of money, but you know, it's something, and both enjoying doing it. So yeah, having that Patreon is really, really important. That's been really, really good. That's a great way to support us. And then taking classes and having more people sign up for classes is always really helpful. Um, and yeah, I think we're trying to keep it sustainable by being relatively small and not growing beyond the amount of money that we have.
Good.
And that's our current approach is, you know, it'd be great to be able to have like even more classes that can bring in more money, or to be able to publish books or things that are more expensive to produce. Um, and hopefully we'll get there. But that's where we're at right now. One year in, being in the black, being able to pay ourselves a little bit, and having a lot of support feels really great.
That's amazing. I mean, I think that model makes a lot of sense, especially with not being tied to print as kind of the end product. Also, it sounds like it also frees you to the type of comics you're able to produce because you're not kind of stuck to certain formatting style or content necessarily if you're not, necessarily thinking about a book that has to be sold to kind of keep the lights on, basically. So it's I think it's a great model, and then with the classes as being kind of the the engine behind it, it's great.
Oh, sorry. I think my Wi-Fi dropped out.
Nope, we're
Oh,
good.
Hopefully
you're
I'm
back.
back.
Okay.
Okay, great. Alex, you were just saying extremely nice things. I heard you say
I was just saying
basically it's a
that
brilliant idea.
yeah, I was just saying that the model is great because I was just saying that I think by not being constrained to a print end product, it gives you also more flexibility in terms of the formatting and content you're able to create because you're it seems like a lot more agile in terms of like the types of work you want to produce because it can be individual comics, that could be of shorter length versus kind of a book that needs to be somehow all connected or cohesive or something like that.
Yeah, a lot of what we focus on is comics that are about 10 to 40 panels long, and that's super rough, but not book length work and not just one panel like gag comics, anywhere in between. But it is cool, yeah, because we're publishing all online, we can be pretty flexible in terms of the styles. It's not like, for example, on Instagram, you're limited to 20 slides. We can have more than 20. And a lot of what we do is we republish people's work. So if somebody has published a book or if they publish something on their own site, we can adapt that to work on our site and publish it. So yeah, it feels really flexible and it's a really good way to keep costs low. I think if you're a publishing house printing books, you have so many costs that come along with that. Publishing the anthology of Cartoons for Palestine, the first edition, was $10,000.
Mm.
And so, we ran a GoFundMe in order to publish that. So people pitched in to cover those costs, but um, not every, you don't always have $10,000 in the bank to publish a book. Um, and so online, it's very little money to publish online. And that makes it so that we can accept more types of comics, accept more people's work. And many people we publish, it's their first published comic is with us. And that feels
Wow,
really
that's great.
cool to support them on that way.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, we'll share all the info for Crucial Comics as well as the Patreon and how to support as well as classes because I'm sure people are going to be really interested in signing up for more classes there as well. That's awesome.
All right, so moving on to our
Yeah,
next
and it's
segment.
been
Oh, sorry.
like, oh, good.
No,
Oh,
sorry.
I just wanted to say, like, because our classes are all online, it's really led to like a lot of our community is people who are chronically ill or have or caregiving. And that is not something I anticipated. It's not like we set out to make a community for
Cool. I think you were cutting out a little bit there, but
ah,
I think we can edit around that, right, Alex?
Yeah.
All right. Well, for time, I think we should think about wrapping up. We have our favorite wrap-up question. Alex, did you want to throw that out?
Yes. So this is something that we like to end every episode with, which is what are you reading? So, Shay, if you have a specific comic or something that you're reading, we'd love to hear about it.
yeah, I read a lot. So I don't just read comics, I read all kinds of books and I'll read anything good. So what I'm reading right now, I just finished Lee Lai's new book, Canon,
Mm.
which Lee Lai's first book, Stone Fruit, it just like shook the earth when it was published. Incredible book. And Canon is again a really like beautiful exploration of really like both subtle emotions and rage. Um, uh, Focused on a Chinese Canadian line cook in Montreal. Beautiful book. I also just got a copy of Ben Passmore's book, Black Arms to Hold You Up,
Mm.
which is a pretty epic work focused on the history of Black resistance in the United States. And I love Ben, like, sort of is a guide through that history. He draws himself interacting with these moments in history and just brings his really, like, incisive and political perspective to that work. And then a book I'm listening to right now is a sci-fi classic, Red Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson. I think it originally came out in like 1993. And I read Kim Stanley Robinson's more recent book, The Ministry for the Future, and loved it. It's all about the future of climate science and like approaches to the climate crisis. And it blew me away. I was like obsessed and recommended it to a ton of people. So now I'm going back and reading all his other work. And I'm going on book tour right now, so I'm doing a lot of traveling. And I was like, I need a really long book to listen to. If I'm going to download one book, it needs to be the longest book. It needs to keep me company on like flights, trains, drives. Red Mars, I think it's 26 hours long as an audiobook. That's great. And so I've been listening to Red Mars kind of obsessively for the last 2 weeks, and it's really kept me company as I'm, driving around and doing all this book tour stuff. And I love it. I just finished it last night. I can't wait to read the second one. So I think it's really relevant for, I don't know, this current political era too. It's about, a group of scientists who are tasked with colonizing Mars and making a new world there. And all of the both political and personal dramas that come up from that and questions around uh, like what should the future of humanity look like? Feels like very current politically pressing issues. So even though it's from 1993, it feels really relevant to right now.
Nice,
Great.
nice. I'll go next real quick. I'm listening to the most recent installment of Louise Penny's Inspector Gamache series. I started listening to these. There are 20 books in this series, and kind of like you, I needed something that would keep my mind away from my podcasts, which I can't bear to listen to most of my news podcasts anymore. And so I needed something
Yeah,
to just compel me. So I have listened to more books this year than I probably have any other time in my life because I've gone through all 20 of Louise Penny's books. And it's their, I don't know if you ever, it's the Three Pines. It's just, it's wonderful mystery series. So I just finished the most recent, which just came out like a week ago. And then I'm also reading Carol Tyler's Ephemerata. Uh, it's called Shaping the Exquisite Nature of Grief, which is just astonishing. I'm a huge fan of Carol Tyler's. And I feel like there was one more. After going to your online event the other day, I got Graphic Rage by Aubrey Hirsch. Love Aubrey's work. I teach the Medicine's Women problem as a fantastic example of how comics can be used for advocacy in healthcare, and just as a model of how to do it. And so I'm excited to read all these. Alex, how about you?
Oh, so Fantagraphics has had a really amazing sale. So I was kind of stocking up on books that I really have always wanted to get. So I got a Crazy Cat compilation. So
ooh,
Crazy
cool.
Cat, yeah, it's amazing. So this one is 1916 to 1918. And so Crazy Cat is one of those comics that I feel like I absorbed as a young child. I don't even know where, like maybe it was a library book or something, but it was something like those images of the cat and the dog and the mouse, were always in my mind, but I never really like read the comics closely. And these are like really amazing reproductions of like the comics from, like over 100 years ago. And George Harriman, he's such an amazing cartoonist, and this work is so, it seems like out of its time. Like in our last episode, we talked a little bit about Calvin and Hobbes, and similarly, these comics like feel like they're not from that time period. They're almost just like in their own universe. And yeah, just the visuals, the way he uses panels, it's all amazing, and it's so surreal. I love it, and yeah, just it's a feast. So yeah, that's currently what I'm obsessed with right now.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's a
Yeah.
delight.
No, well, thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited for the new book, and this episode will be out probably a week after the book is out, so that's perfect timing.
Great.
And then Crucial Comics also, all of that information will be in our show notes as well. So, yeah, thanks again for joining us, and it was a great conversation.
Yeah,
Bye, you guys.
bye bye.